The Picture of Dorian Gray. It's a novel written by Oscar Wilde, a renowned Irish writer and playwright. The novel was first published in 1890 and has since become one of Wilde's most famous works. The Picture of Dorian Gray tells the story of a young man named Dorian Gray, who is the subject of a portrait painted by an artist named Basil Hallward. Dorian becomes infatuated with his own beauty and youth and expresses a desire to remain eternally young while his portrait ages in his place. As a result of a Faustian bargain, Dorian's wish is granted, and he remains youthful and untouched by the passage of time, while the portrait ages and reflects his immoral actions. Throughout the novel, Dorian engages in a life of hedonism and indulges in various vices, leading to a moral and psychological decay. The portrait becomes increasingly grotesque, serving as a physical manifestation of his hidden sins and the corruption of his soul. Dorian's actions and their consequences form the central themes of the book, including the pursuit of pleasure, the nature of art, and the duality of human nature. "I wish I could change places with you, Dorian," said Lord Henry, with a sigh. "Don't talk like that. You fill me with strange horror. You are young, Dorian, and youth is the one thing worth having. I would give my soul for that. You have a soul, of course. Everybody has. But it's a question of how much you pay for it. My dear boy, if I could only get back my youth, I would give anything in the world for it. I would give my soul for it. You have a wonderful influence. Let it be for good, not for evil. They say that you corrupt everyone whom you come near, and that your life is horribly vile. Keep your innocence and your youth. It is an awful thing to grow old. But the more I know of you, the more I long to be you. Do not be afraid. I am so enamored of you that I will kill you rather than let you grow old." Lord Henry expresses his admiration for Dorian's youth and beauty, saying he would give anything, even his soul, to regain his own youth. Lord Henry sees Dorian as a symbol of eternal youth and vitality, and he becomes infatuated with the idea of possessing that youthfulness himself. Dorian, on the other hand, is initially taken aback by Lord Henry's desire and tells him not to talk like that. He finds Lord Henry's words disturbing and is wary of the corrupting influence he is rumored to have. However, Dorian is also intrigued by Lord Henry's fascination with his youth and the power it seems to hold. Lord Henry's longing to be young again represents a common human desire to cling to youth and beauty, which are often associated with vitality, pleasure, and a sense of freedom. It highlights the fleeting nature of youth and the fear of aging and mortality. Dorian, influenced by Lord Henry's words and his own narcissism, becomes increasingly obsessed with his own youth and beauty throughout the novel. This obsession leads him down a path of indulgence, moral decay, and ultimately, a desperate attempt to maintain his youthful appearance at any cost. The passage sets the stage for Dorian's transformation and his eventual downfall as he becomes consumed by his own image and the pursuit of eternal youth. A Faustian Bargain. In the book, Dorian Gray becomes increasingly obsessed with the idea of his portrait bearing the marks of his sins and aging while he remains eternally young and untouched. He expresses his desire for such a state, and a sort of Faustian bargain is struck between Dorian and an unknown force or supernatural entity. Here's an excerpt from the moment Dorian makes his wish. "How sad it is," murmured Dorian Gray, with his eyes still fixed upon his own portrait. "How sad it is. I shall grow old, and horrible, and dreadful. But this picture will remain always young. It will never be older than this particular day of June. If it were only the other way. If it were I who was to be always young, and the picture that was to grow old. For that, I would give everything. Yes, there is nothing in the whole world I would not give. I would give my soul for that." After making this desperate plea, Dorian's wish is granted, and he begins to lead a life of indulgence and debauchery, while his portrait starts to reflect the consequences of his immoral actions. The supernatural element in the story, which remains somewhat mysterious, suggests a Faustian pact where Dorian's desire for eternal youth and beauty comes at a heavy price as his soul becomes increasingly corrupted. Driven by his newfound belief in the immortality of his youth and the separation of his physical appearance from the consequences of his actions. Here's how Dorian begins to live his life. Pursuit of pleasure. Dorian becomes enamored with pleasure-seeking and the pursuit of sensual experiences. He indulges in lavish parties, attends opulent gatherings, and seeks out new and thrilling sensations. In the center of the room, clamped to an upright easel, stood the full-length portrait of a young man of extraordinary personal beauty, and in the foreground of the picture, some lovely spring flowers, tulips, lilies of the valley, narcissus, floated in an ornamental china bowl, and beside them stood a large jug of silver gilt, containing water. Dorian Gray hurried along the quay through the drizzling rain. His meeting with Lord Henry had not gone well, and he sought refuge in the decadent pleasures of the city. He had become infatuated with the idea of living a life without consequences, driven by the pursuit of pleasure and the avoidance of pain. He found himself in opulent party halls, where the air was thick with the scent of exotic perfumes and the sound of laughter and music filled his ears. He danced with the most beautiful women, savored the finest wines, and immersed himself in the thrill of the moment. Each indulgence provided a temporary escape from the realities of life and the burden of conscience. Dorian reveled in the sensation of pleasure coursing through his veins, the exhilaration of gratifying his desires without remorse. He embraced a life of hedonism, believing that he could separate his physical experiences from the consequences of his actions. However, beneath the surface, there was a darker undercurrent to Dorian's pursuit of pleasure. It was driven by a deep fear of aging, mortality, and the decay of beauty. Dorian sought to preserve his youth and beauty at any cost, clinging to the belief that indulging in pleasure could keep him forever young and shield him from the consequences of his choices. This pursuit of pleasure, while initially enticing, ultimately leads Dorian down a path of moral degradation and internal turmoil. The novel explores the consequences of unchecked hedonism and the dangerous allure of a life devoid of responsibility and ethical considerations. The Picture of Dorian Gray serves as a cautionary tale, highlighting the destructive nature of a life solely focused on the pursuit of pleasure without regard for the impact on oneself and others. It explores the complexities of human desires, the fragility of beauty, and the price one pays for forsaking morality in favor of momentary gratification. Hedonistic Lifestyle. Dorian embraces a hedonistic lifestyle, indulging in various vices without remorse. He engages in excessive drinking, experiments with drugs, and pursues sexual relationships, often without concern for the consequences or the impact on others. Dorian Gray was now seated at a beautifully adorned table in a luxurious private room. Crystal glasses sparkled, and rare delicacies were spread out before him. Surrounding him were a group of people who reveled in the pleasures of the moment, indulging in excessive drinking, engaging in frivolous conversations, and laughing without inhibition. It was a scene of unapologetic hedonism. Dorian had fully embraced a hedonistic lifestyle, seeking gratification in the pursuit of pleasure and sensory experiences. He found himself drawn to the allure of decadence, believing that through indulgence, he could escape the burdens of guilt and responsibility. In this pursuit, he surrounded himself with individuals who shared his desires and encouraged his most reckless inclinations. He sought out the finest wines and spirits, relishing in their intoxicating effects as he sought to drown his inner turmoil. He pursued sensual encounters, engaging in fleeting relationships and encounters with both men and women, driven by a craving for physical pleasure and a desire to satiate his insatiable desires. Dorian reveled in the uninhibited laughter and superficial conversations that filled his surroundings, finding solace in the fleeting moments of bliss that his hedonistic lifestyle provided. However, beneath the surface, there was a growing emptiness and a profound disconnect from genuine human connections. The hedonistic lifestyle Dorian embraced was not simply a pursuit of pleasure, it was a desperate attempt to fill the void within himself, to escape the haunting presence of his hidden sins and the deteriorating portrait that bore the weight of his immoral actions. It represented a detachment from moral responsibility and a surrender to immediate gratification. Woven within the narrative is a cautionary message about the dangers of unrestrained hedonism. Dorian's pursuit of pleasure, driven by his fear of aging and the allure of a life without consequences, leads him deeper into a moral abyss, corroding his soul and distorting his perception of reality. The Picture of Dorian Gray explores the hollowness that can accompany a life solely dedicated to the pursuit of pleasure. It examines the destructive effects of unchecked hedonism, highlighting the importance of balance, morality, and the genuine connections that give life meaning beyond transient indulgences. Influence of Lord Henry, who initially sparked Dorian's fascination with eternal youth, continues to influence him. Lord Henry espouses a philosophy of pleasure and hedonism, encouraging Dorian to fully embrace his desires and follow his whims without restraint. Dorian Gray sat in his opulent study, surrounded by lavish decorations and shelves filled with books. Lord Henry, with his charismatic presence, stood before him, his voice dripping with cynical wit and unconventional philosophies. Dorian hung on to his every word, captivated by Lord Henry's persuasive influence. Lord Henry espoused a philosophy that challenged societal norms and traditional moral values. He encouraged Dorian to embrace his desires and follow his whims, unburdened by the shackles of conventional morality. His words painted a vivid picture of a life lived solely for pleasure and personal gratification. Under Lord Henry's influence, Dorian's perception of the world began to shift. He became captivated by the idea of his own beauty and the power it held over others. Lord Henry's hedonistic worldview resonated with Dorian, feeding into his own narcissistic tendencies and deepening his obsession with youth and physical appearance. Lord Henry's words became a catalyst for Dorian's transformation. They granted him permission to pursue a life of indulgence and embrace the pursuit of pleasure as his primary goal. Dorian saw in Lord Henry a reflection of his own desires and a justification for his increasingly reckless behavior. However, beneath the allure of Lord Henry's charm and wit, there was a darker implication. Lord Henry's influence was not solely about the pursuit of pleasure but also about the erosion of moral boundaries. His influence encouraged Dorian to abandon his conscience and indulge in his darkest desires without consideration for the consequences. Lord Henry's influence symbolizes the corrupting power of persuasive personalities and the dangers of surrendering one's moral compass to external forces. Through Dorian's relationship with Lord Henry, the novel explores the seductive nature of influence and the profound impact it can have on an individual's choices and actions. The Picture of Dorian Gray serves as a cautionary tale, warning against blindly accepting the influence of others without critical thought and self-reflection. It prompts readers to question the motives and values of those who seek to shape their beliefs and desires, reminding them of the importance of maintaining a sense of individuality and moral integrity. Immoral Acts. As Dorian's pursuit of pleasure intensifies, he becomes increasingly entangled in morally questionable situations. He manipulates and seduces others, leading to heartbreak and ruin for some of his acquaintances. Dorian's actions, hidden from the world, take a toll on his soul, while his portrait bears the marks of his hidden sins. Dorian Gray, consumed by the pursuit of pleasure and a desire to maintain his eternal youth, found himself descending into a world of immoral acts. He reveled in a life devoid of ethical considerations, indulging in actions that left a trail of destruction in his wake. He manipulated those around him, using his charm and charisma to exploit their vulnerabilities for his own gain. Dorian's seductive allure drew others into his web of deceit, as he toyed with their emotions and played upon their desires to fulfill his own selfish ends. He engaged in scandalous love affairs, pursuing fleeting relationships without regard for the hearts he broke or the lives he disrupted. His pursuit of pleasure knew no boundaries, and he reveled in the power he held over others, relishing in the knowledge that he could use them as pawns in his game of hedonistic indulgence. Dorian's immoral acts extended beyond emotional manipulation. He dabbled in a world of vice, embracing the darker side of human nature. He experimented with drugs, seeking artificial highs to numb the guilt that threatened to consume him. He frequented dens of iniquity, exploring the depths of decadence that society deemed taboo. As Dorian's actions became increasingly wicked, the portrait that bore the weight of his sins transformed into a grotesque representation of his moral decay. The Picture of Dorian Gray prompts readers to reflect on the moral choices they make and the potential consequences of their actions. It serves as a reminder that a life driven solely by hedonistic pursuits and a disregard for ethical principles can lead to inner turmoil, isolation, and the deterioration of one's humanity. Artistic and cultural pursuits. Despite his indulgent lifestyle, Dorian maintains an interest in the arts and culture. He frequents the theater, collects exquisite art, and cultivates relationships with artists and intellectuals. However, his pursuits in these realms are often tinged with decadence and a disregard for conventional moral values. He sought solace and inspiration in the realm of artistic pursuits, exploring the beauty and creativity that existed beyond the confines of societal norms. Dorian frequented the theater, immersing himself in the world of drama and performance. He appreciated the power of storytelling and the ability of actors to transport audiences to different realms of emotion and imagination. Through the theater, he found a temporary escape from his own tumultuous reality. His interest in the arts extended to his collection of exquisite paintings and sculptures. He surrounded himself with beauty, appreciating the craftsmanship and artistic vision that went into creating these masterpieces. Dorian sought out renowned artists and intellectuals, cultivating relationships with individuals who shared his passion for the arts. However, Dorian's artistic pursuits were not devoid of the influence of his hedonistic lifestyle. He viewed art through a lens of decadence and sensuality, seeking out pieces that titillated his senses and reflected his own desires. His collection became a testament to his opulent lifestyle, filled with provocative and often controversial works that mirrored his own moral corruption. The portrayal of Dorian's artistic and cultural pursuits in the novel serves a dual purpose. On one hand, it highlights the transformative power of art, showcasing how it can provide solace, inspiration, and a means of expression in the face of life's challenges and moral complexities. On the other hand, it serves as a critique of the potential corruption of art when it becomes entangled with hedonism and the pursuit of pleasure. Dorian's collection and his appreciation for art become extensions of his own decadent lifestyle, reflecting his inner turmoil and moral decay. The Picture of Dorian Gray prompts readers to examine the relationship between art, morality, and the human condition. It raises questions about the role of art in society, the responsibility of artists, and the potential consequences of using art as a vehicle for indulgence and self-gratification. In summary, Dorian's artistic and cultural pursuits provide moments of respite and inspiration amidst his immoral life, but they also serve as a reflection of his moral corruption and the potentially destructive influence of decadence on the artistic realm. As Dorian Gray descended into a life of debauchery and wickedness, his portrait, hidden away in his attic, underwent a haunting transformation. The youthful visage that once adorned the canvas began to show signs of decay and corruption. Wrinkles etched themselves upon the face, the eyes grew hollow, and a sinister aura surrounded the portrait. Each immoral act committed by Dorian left its mark upon the portrait. The portrait became a mirror of his soul, capturing the true nature of his actions and the weight of his hidden sins. While Dorian remained outwardly youthful and untouched by time, the portrait bore the brunt of his moral deterioration. The aging and deterioration of the portrait serve as a powerful metaphor within the novel. It represents the profound consequences of unchecked hedonism and the erosion of one's inner self when guided solely by the pursuit of pleasure and the abandonment of moral values. The portrait acts as a moral compass, reflecting the consequences of Dorian's immoral choices and providing a stark reminder of the decay that lies beneath the facade of eternal youth and beauty. It unveils the ugliness that resides within Dorian's soul, contrasting with his outwardly handsome and untouched appearance. Moreover, the aging portrait symbolizes the hidden costs and internal torment that accompany a life lived in pursuit of fleeting pleasures. It serves as a reminder that the consequences of immoral actions cannot be escaped or ignored indefinitely. While Dorian revels in his external beauty, the portrait stands as a silent witness to the corruption and decay that lie within. The Picture of Dorian Gray compels readers to confront the consequences of their own actions and the choices they make in life. It serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of sacrificing one's morality and succumbing to a life of hedonism, warning of the inevitable toll it takes on the soul and the potential for self-destruction. Through the portrayal of the aging portrait, the novel explores the complex relationship between external appearances and internal character, emphasizing the importance of integrity and the preservation of one's moral compass in the face of temptation and fleeting pleasures. In summary, the aging and reflection of Dorian's immoral actions in the portrait serve as a potent symbol of the consequences of his choices and the decay of his soul. It underscores the novel's exploration of morality, the price of unchecked hedonism, and the inescapable nature of one's true self. Dorian Gray starts as a young and innocent man. However, Dorian's fascination with his own beauty and youth leads him to make a wish to remain forever young, which sets the stage for his downward spiral. The cause for Dorian Gray's descent into a life of debauchery can be attributed to a combination of factors, including his own desires, the influence of Lord Henry, and the Faustian bargain he makes with the portrait. The Picture of Dorian Gray is known for its witty dialogue, aestheticism, and exploration of themes related to beauty, morality, and the consequences of one's actions. It remains a classic of Victorian literature and continues to be widely studied and appreciated for its philosophical and psychological insights.